Now, this is a follow-up to a story that I touched on Thursday, and I really wanted Monica to go into detail about it. This is from Kiplinger. Interest rates expect 6 more rate hikes this year. Kiplinger's latest forecast on interest rates. Like I said, we talked about this a little bit on Thursday, but I am nowhere near an expert. And to be fair, Anywho, Monica, why don't you go into this story with us and let's talk about it a little more in depth.
Well, and I will reiterate, I am in no way an expert. This is just an opinion on what we've seen and being in the market. I was a real estate agent for the past 3 years down in Raleigh, and some of the craziness that 3-year period saw.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely different than any time before that.
It's not that you're an expert, but you're certainly closer to the pulse than, the plebes.
Yes. But so this is an article from Kiplinger, March 17th, 2022. So in line with what we're seeing right now, Federal Reserve raised the federal funds interest rate by 1/4 percentage point today, and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell suggests that more rate hikes were to come in order to fight inflation. He expects inflation to drop below 3% by the end of 2022, but Powell is concerned that the current high inflation rates near 8% might cause businesses and workers to increase their expectations of future inflation, thus raising prices and wages in a self-fulfilling prophecy. As a result, expect 6 more federal funds rate increases this year, 1 at each meeting. Powell also expects that the Fed will start selling Treasury and mortgage-backed securities from its balance sheet this year, called quantitative tightening, or QT. Look for this to be announced at the Fed's May 4th meeting, with sales to begin in June. Powell promised that securities would be sold, unlike the last time the Fed did QT back in 2017 to 2019, when it simply stopped replacing securities as they matured. Now, what that means for some of us out there in the regular world, kind of going, okay, well, how does that affect everything? Well, for the last couple of years, we've all seen the housing market be completely insane. There's not enough supply for people who are qualified for these mortgages. Now, the Fed being raised isn't a direct raise on mortgage rates. They don't have control over that. But mortgage rates historically push up when the Fed gets raised, because when you're being charged a higher interest rate, you're going to push that down the line to your consumers as far as the bank is concerned. And if you scroll down, long-term rates, such as for mortgages, are not directly affected by the Fed raises short rates, but may follow short rates higher because the current inflationary environment. Expect the Treasury 10-year yield to rise to 2.5% by the end of 2022. The rise in the 10-year rate will also push up mortgage rates from the current average of 4.2% for 30-year fixed-rate loans to 4.5% by the end of 2022. 15-year fixed-rate mortgages rise from 3.2% to 3.8%.
Now, we're going to take a quick moment here. So, wow. What was I remember you mentioning this, the 4.2 that we're currently at. What was it, say, a year or two ago? What was the rate the last time you were in that game?
We were consistently seeing people come in with like 3% rates or lower.
Yeah.
And then you get into all of the different breakdowns of the different types of mortgages that you can get and jumbo loan packages. And I mean, definitely if you're considering purchasing a home or selling your home and purchasing another, talk to your mortgage broker. Right now is that time period where it's almost a feeding frenzy, because you see it coming. When you see a 0.3%, it doesn't sound like a whole lot. When you're talking, going from $2,100 a month for a mortgage to $2,500 a month mortgage, it does add up. So you're seeing that jump, and even a partial percentage point. That's why people buy down points when they first get their mortgages. And I mean, we financed at 5, so it's not like it can't be done.
Well, that wasn't here. That was about 4 years ago.
Yes.
But I mean, even that was the complications behind that were insane. When we went to refinance and they did it properly, we were originally speculated at like 2.5%.
I think so.
It was low. It was much lower.
But
much lower.
But at the time, 5 was okay. But the housing market prices were affordable as well. You could still find a house in the $100,000 range. that is livable and acceptable. And a lot of people don't understand that when you're borrowing, when you're getting a mortgage, they'll look at the value of the house, but also the livability of the house. They're not going to finance a house that you cannot live in for your standard everyday mortgage. So there's a lot of confusion out there when you get into the real estate game of, well, I can afford this much a month. Yes, but what type of loan do you have? And this is all going to end up being, in my opinion, we're going to see a huge feeding frenzy in the market. People will buy up whatever they can. And then people will start to realize that the what they're paying for houses isn't worth it. So a lot more of our generation will start to decide to continue renting, or continue living with parents or in-laws or whoever, to avoid those mortgage rates and to avoid the cost of living that we've been seeing.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge shift in the American ideology from, okay, we're going to own our house and we're going to be out and about, and now we're going back to staying home longer.
It's almost like
and
we're
paying off debt.
pushing for a reset of sorts, maybe on a great scale, almost like you kind of want people to own nothing, but I'm sure they'll be happy.
Well, and here's the thing is that the Fed has to be very careful with this, because if they raise rates too quickly and inflation stays high for too long, you're looking at a deep recession, because not only can people not afford to borrow, they can't afford to spend.
So let me ask you this, and this is going to be the first question out of anyone who is especially skeptical because of the nature of you, me, and the environment we live in. Is this something that can just be purely blamed? It's all Biden's fault like other things, or is it a current administration thing, or is this something that has been building up and it's just a natural wax and wane of the industry?
This is definitely something that has been building up. The rate that we're going to see it come down really depends on the current administration, and I don't have much faith in that. I have more faith in the fact that, historically we've seen these things plunge and drop and become catastrophic. But we've really gotten this mentality, and there was an article that I was reading that said, what if we had a recession and nobody showed up?
Huh.
Meaning,
that's an interesting thought.
What if historically, this is supposed to happen, but we just decide not to let it? That's great an idea, but a lot of times these things happen because you're not producing. You can't live on credit for the rest of your life.
Not normally, no.
Which is this horrible mentality that a lot of us have, being brought up in an era where you can go thousands of dollars into debt for student loans.
Yes.
And
predatory.
And now we're sitting right on top of the beginning of next month. Those loans are supposed to be kicked back into payback mode. So how many people are going to be defaulting on student loans, and how will that affect them in the future?
Yep.
And what is the administration going to do when part of what they ran on was zero student loan debt?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious, even to the stooges who went for it, that they say whatever they need to say to get elected, and then they immediately backtrack, and it will never happen. And unfortunately, there's enough, and this is the DNC's words, not mine, from the WikiLeaks drop in 2016. They have enough, quote, useful idiots to get these things done, or at least to get them passed, because you don't read the bill, you hear a nice, pleasant-sounding title about something, and you go, oh, I'm on board, because I wouldn't be against that. And unfortunately, they got the stooges in, they expected results, but it doesn't work like that.
Well, they drove up costs of education so much.
Yes.
And we're not saying that, teachers and stuff shouldn't be paid, but these universities are making hand over fist. I mean, they are just raking in money to teach ideologies. And how many classes did we take to get our degree that were not linked to anything with our degree?
Yep.
And they're floating these programs like they're floating credit. If we keep printing money, maybe we won't have to deal with the recession, and that's not how this happens.
Yeah, no.
You keep spending on programs, and you can't run on a platform of forgive all student debt.
Right.
It might be conceivable to start to cut back on the interest rates on student loans, or,
which, like, that kind of thing I would be all for. Like, if they came out and they said, okay, it's ludicrous to think that all of your debt should be forgiven. However, from here forward, all interest rates and
We're not
all
gonna
interest
make
based.
money off what we
Exactly.
loaned
We're
you.
not going to make money off of you trying to buy yourself an education for a better life. That would be the smart thing to do, but unfortunately, it's starting to feel more and more like these heads of state are essentially mafia dons saying, "Hey, where's my cut? Where's
That's
my
the really
due?"
scary part is that
Yeah.
they built these student loans in and these packages in where we think, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to put ourselves $30,000 in debt, and it's going to make up for it in our job down the road.
Boy, if only
And
it
a
was
lot of
only
people-
30,000, right?
Well,
if you are laser focused, if you get your stuff, if you're smart and go to like community college first and get all the basics out of the way, then yes, 30,000 is probably
but then you have people who think that it was free money and they don't understand the concept that they do have to pay that back.
yeah.
And the government has it set up they're expecting that payback
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise their coffers don't stay full. They can't continue to dole out money
Mm-hmm.
and then not have it paid back to them. Somebody has to pay. So who is it? Where does that come from? And if we forgive future interest rates, those are still things that we as a government have been expecting. So how are we going to make up for that? You know, and giving away money to other countries for their aid is not going to assist us in that.
No, and we will definitely, as everybody knows, we will get into the sheer incompetence of our government. But before we move on to our next story, we would never, ever give financial advice. That's up
Yes.
to you. However, in your opinion, if somebody, say, was thinking about buying a house, what advice would you yourself take that they could then take into consideration?
Well, so I was talking to my sister the other day, and we were talking about selling a house, purchasing a house, and kind of the time that we're in. There's maps of different areas of the United States where home prices have not inflated as much as other areas.
Talking more like rural areas.
Well, and it can go state by state. It can go specific county by county. If you're purchasing a house in an area and you know that price is way overinflated for what the true value of the home is.
Yeah, you can always look at historical data. They usually
Yes.
always provide it. But
Yes, and talk to your local real estate agent because they'll be able to tell you, yes, this is consistently the price over the last couple of years, or no, this is, jumped 15% higher in the last year. Now, if you're looking at that, if it's something that you can afford, by all means, but don't put yourself in a position where you're buying a house in an already inflated area that you can't long-term afford if the value goes down. So when you're thinking about purchasing your home and you're going to go and buy a $700,000 home, if the value on that home dips, are you going to stay there long enough for the value to recoup? Because you're essentially buying into an area hoping that the value in that area either maintains or goes up. But realistically, if it's already gone up, 15, 20%, how much higher is it going to climb?
there is a ceiling. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And-
Absolutely.
Just be cautious that if you're in one of those areas, is there a reason for maintained growth, or does it seem like that area is going to stagnate? Because once it stagnates, are you going to stay there for the next 10 years to recoup your money? Or are you going to try and move? Because if you move on a downswing, you're going to lose out.
Absolutely. So make sure you do your research. Definitely look into, like she said, expansion over the 5 or 10 years. Something that was happening in Raleigh, like I mentioned on Thursday, was, Apple was coming in, Amazon was coming in. Things were being built and prospects were there. So in that kind of situation, granted, that place is a madhouse as far as real estate goes. Like I said, like we touched on. You do the research and you see, okay, well, this is expensive. However, they're in a state of growth. Like they are
Yes.
obviously in a state of growth, and therefore it's at least safer than some of these other things. So really, the best thing someone can do is really just research.
Yes.
Don't dive into anything. Make sure you look at the bigger picture, especially with the pinch that's coming. Any closing thoughts before we hop on to the Lord and Savior of the Democratic Party returning?
Well, I really think that people need to look at their investments wisely coming up
Yes.
in this year. Whether you're, and there's a lot of speculation, well, buy into Bitcoin or Doge or any of those,
No one's talking about Doge. Come on.
or, put your money into Wall Street. Well, is that going to bottom out?
Yep.
Put your money into savings. Well, is that earning enough? I think this is one of those points where no matter what you decide to do, diversify.
To say doing something is probably the most important thing
Yes.
because the scariest thing about inflation is that the value of your money today is more than the value of your money tomorrow. If you just sit on your savings and hope that the value will increase, inflation will just knock you down a couple pegs. So again, no financial advice here, but I would start just looking at like you said, diversifying your portfolio.
Well, and make sure that you're investing in things that you believe in, not just because you think the market's swinging,
Yes.
you know,
Do your research.
and make sure that you're promoting that. Like
Yep.
we are boycotting Disney.
Oh, everybody should be boycotting Disney. They're a bunch
But
of
that's
child
our
groomers.
personal choice.
Oh, of course,
and
of course.
that's one of those things that I wouldn't invest in any of their stuff right now as much as it's being pushed. I
Nope.
wouldn't invest in a vacation to Disney.
Never.
That's not where we would spend our money.
Nope.
So yeah, it's all about personal choice in the market, and I think that Tim was right about this being one of those times where you'll see conservatives and liberals extremely split on where that money needs to go.